Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to do an engine wiring harness removal slash replacement. This is an 03 BMW 330i. I'm going to do things a little differently. I'm going to first video the top part of this, removing it from the chassis side, and then over there with the engine computer and the relay center there. And then we're actually going to remove the engine from the car. This is coming out anyway, but it'll be able to give you a little bit more detailed pictures of where everything clips in from underneath the intake manifold, which is almost impossible to see with it in the car. So let's get started. Okay, first and foremost, disconnect your negative battery cable whenever you're doing any kind of wiring or working on any electrical system on the car. That's a must. So first do that, and then come to the power supply on the passenger side. And there's one single nut there, 19 millimeter, and we're gonna loosen that. Move that out of the way. Put the nut back on so you don't lose it. And now we'll move to the other side. Okay, here on the driver's side, there's a 13 millimeter nut back there on the firewall. Crack that loose. Slide that off. Put the nut back on so you don't lose it. And now we'll move to a series of connectors that are all in this relay electrical center in here. So just start disconnecting them. Some connected to the computer. And if your car's automatic, there'll be a bunch connected to the TCM. Hang the harness over the engine. All right, once you have everything unplugged from the computers, just slide them out. So you have to pull out this insert. This is the transmission computer. This is a car's automatic. Now this whole insert pop right out. And there are a bunch of zip ties. Go ahead and cut them. And now all these relays need to be removed off the carrier here. It's a flathead screwdriver. Push all the relays up and slide them back through. I'll just pull it out the brake booster. You lay it over the intake manifold. Okay, now we have the engine on the floor here. We're gonna do a quick walk around to show you all the wiring harness where it's routed on the engine. First, we're gonna pop these covers off so we can see where they connect to the coil pack and the fuel injectors. It's just two 10mm nuts inside that cover there, two 10mm bolts on top of that fuel rail cover. They pop right off. Take the oil cover cap off to take the engine cover. Right now you can see coil harness. There are the top O2 sensors routed all the way around. The coil harness wraps around the back of the engine here. The O2 sensors run up behind there as well. And then you can see this is an automatic car. The harness runs all the way down the back and over here to the back connector. And then here we have the wiring where we disconnected it from the relay center on the driver's side. And then we'll go underneath the intake manifold here where you can see where the starter is. And then the crank sensors behind that. Throttle body runs all the way underneath the intake manifold there. Back of the alternator. And then to the front of the engine. And right there on the exhaust camshaft sensor. Okay, now we're going to remove the coil harness. There's one 8mm nut right here that holds this little ground strap in here. We'll zip that off. Now, this is an 03 to 06 style coil. You just lift these little tabs up. And each one will slide out. Now, pry up on this part of the harness. Pops right off. Now this power wire does run in this plastic case here. We just popped it out here, and then coil harness, where it hooks up to that main relay box. And that's it. Now we'll get the next one. Okay, now we're gonna do the O2 harness, and it's also the transmission harness as well. That's one piece, the second part of the engine harness. Top O2 sensors, pre-cat. Set them out of the way. Now, post-cat. O2 sensors are right on top of the injector rail. Pull them back out of the way. Now switch sides and pull the transmission harness off the trans. Okay, now we're going to disconnect transmission harness. That pushes down, pulls out, pops off, and then there is this one down here, and that just twists right off. Oh, this is a ZF transmission. This is different than the GM transmission, which has the main connector like this one here on the other side on the back. But same thing, pops right off, just twist it down. And there is the O2 sensor and transmission harness. Okay, now we're gonna start with the main engine wiring harness. We'll start at the front of the engine, pull these connectors up the banister solenoid. This one off the thermostat housing. Pull that, take that out of the way. And then there's one right here on the other banister solenoid. Pull that out of the way. And I'm going to show you these small fuel injector clips. Then we're going to get a small flathead screwdriver in there and pry them out on either side. Then lift this whole injector harness piece out of there. Okay, now we're gonna move the main engine harness. It's easy to move the dipstick. It's a 13mm bolt off the engine mount, and it gives you a little bit of play to get to everything. And now I'm gonna go around and just disconnect the connectors, the diesel valve. There's one here on the idle control. The purge valve. One back on the oil filter housing. There's one main connector on the alternator. And then a 16mm nut for the power wire on the back of the alternator. A couple other connectors around this main portion of the harness. And there are a couple 10mm nuts and bolts holding the harness to the engine. One on the throttle body. Then you can remove this vacuum canister. It's just a 13mm nut. To get that out of the way, you can see the crankshaft sensor. And then there's one underneath the oil pan. There'll be a couple of zip ties here and there. Just disconnect those, cut them off. One on the side of the intake, and then one on the back of the head. Now we can get to the starter. I start with the main 13mm nut on the back of the starter. Slide the power wires off just to make some extra room. Now there's a 10mm nut bottom here. And then an 8mm nut at the top. Pull those off the terminals. And now you can slowly just wiggle the harness out. Another 10mm nut back here on the throttle body. And there's the knock sensors that are all the way in the back here. There's the oil pressure sensor, back of the oil filter housing. And there you go. Okay, now I have the complete engine harness on the bench, and I separate it into the three different harnesses. So the main one here is what we call the main engine harness that has fuel injectors, mass airflow, idle air control, oil pressure sensor. All the ones are actually mounted on the engine itself. And the second one here would be the transmission sensor harness with the O2 sensors on it as well. And then the last one would be the ignition coil harness here. So if you end up having a problem with any one of these on your car, you can actually replace them individually. You can just buy the one that is damaged or replace whatever one you want. So you don't have to go ahead and buy the whole complete engine harness if someone's selling it that way. Thanks again for watching.